On the 19th of December 2008, a remarkable step towards resuming normal diplomatic relations between the people of Britain and the American embassy occurred. Perhaps as a sign of things to come from the recent President-elect Barack Obama's regime, the embassy resumed one of the main points of its diplomatic functions when residing in another country by greeting protesters, accepting its letter of concern and promising to pass on London's displeasure at the war in Iraq and the jailing of Iraqi journalist Muntadar al-Zaidi. Last week, al-Zaidi, an Iraqi journalist, threw his shoes at George W. Bush as he gave a press conference with the Iraqi Prime Minister. He shouted "killer of Iraqis, killer of children," which pretty much summed up the feelings of millions of people around the world. With millions of well-wishers, you could expect that in any open liberal democracy, especially the one that the taxpayers of the West have paid billions for, that someone who commits what is a minor public order offence, that they would be brought to a court and given bail. However, despite billions of Western taxpayers' dollars going into the rebuilding of Iraq, mostly through contracts to the Carlyle Group, a Bush-owned family business, the reality of freedom of speech and the safety of journalists is quite a sobering reality. Unfortunately, the US tactics of torturing detainees and not bringing them to a court of law also sadly applies to the journalists of Iraq. The media workers against the war and the Stop the War coalition who called this protest said they have no doubt the journalist's life is in extreme danger, and that the Iraqi government and US forces have an appalling record of detaining, abusing, torturing and killing journalists. The Committee to Protect Journalists also said that the vast majority of victims continue to be Iraqi, most of whom are singled out by armed groups and murdered with impunity. No doubt the United States under the Bush administration has not been keen on free and fair reporting coming out of this fledgling democracy, which many feel has resulted in the brutality towards journalists like what Muntadar has suffered in recent days. Additionally, the United States has also invested $300 million over the next 3 years to produce news stories for broadcast by the Iraqi media in what the US military describes as information or psychological operations in Iraq. It is extremely concerning when an occupying force is the source of the majority of news in a country. Why did Stop the War Coalition come to the American Embassy today?
Well, the journalist who threw a shoe at George Bush has been put in prison and we don't know when he'll be released. We thought it was a powerful symbolic protest which showed that the Iraqi people despise George Bush and what he'd done to their country, and this is one act of resistance which captured the feeling of, we think, 27 million Iraqis.
Terrorist George Bush! Terrorist George Bush! Terrorist George Bush! Terrorist George Bush! Terrorist free! Free! al-Zaidi! Free! Free! al-Zaidi! Free! Free! al-Zaidi!
What's been heard of the journalist since he threw the shoes at George Bush?
Nothing has been heard from Muntadar al-Zaidi. He was taken away. He has broken ribs and a broken wrist. We know this from his family. His lawyer hasn't been allowed to see him. His family haven't been allowed to see him. The prison that he's supposed to be in, he is not in. So therefore he has disappeared into the Iraqi justice system, and we have concerns that the American occupying forces not implemented a justice system which we have in this country or they have in the United States. They've allowed a ragtag justice system, which means that ordinary Iraqis can disappear into Abu Ghraib for months or years not to be seen by their family. If that is the fate of Muntadar, then we must protest again.
He hasn't been brought to court?
He hasn't been brought to court.
And he's suffering serious injuries?
He suffered serious injuries at his arrest. We don't know anything. I mean, I can't emphasise this enough. He has disappeared. His family haven't seen him. He has had one phone call to a lawyer. He met with an interrogating judge, and the judge told him that he would receive no bail. Considering this is a journalist and a man who's not going to throw shoes at anyone else, only George Bush, then there's no reason why he shouldn't be allowed out on bail.
Free! Free! al-Zaidi! 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 Free! Free!
It does seem unusual that he hasn't got bail, doesn't it? In London, if you attempted to throw a shoe at someone, you'd be brought to a court fairly quickly, wouldn't you?
That's true. Well, I think they're worried about his example spreading. It's already spread to New York and South Korea. In New York recently, they put the price of the tube up, and a man got up, took his shoe off and said, "This is for you," and threw it at the head of the Metropolitan Transport Authority. So you can see that, you know, the shoe is going to become a symbol of resistance for the rest of the world. And Muntadar al-Zaidi made it that symbol, so they're frightened of him and they want to keep him locked up.
Free al-Zaidi! Free! Free al-Zaidi! Free! Free al-Zaidi! Free! Free al-Zaidi! Free! Free al-Zaidi!
And what concessions have you gained today from the American embassy? What have they agreed?
Well, they have agreed nothing except to accept the letter, which is of course new for us because generally they tell us they won't even receive the letter, that we should put it in the post to them. So therefore, to receive the letter at the embassy and to receive the shoes, they've offered, they're going to take the shoes into the embassy and count them and inform George Bush of what we've done. So therefore, if these are happening across the world, which they are, then it's a powerful message that the world stands with the Iraqis and with Muntadar al-Zaidi and against George Bush and the American government.
So do you think this marks a change in community relations for the embassy here in London, that they're willing to accept protest letters now as where they weren't before?
Well, I think it marks a change in their position on Iraq. It does not mark a change on their position on Afghanistan. Of course, Barack Obama will send thousands of troops to Afghanistan, which is another unwinnable war, and that will mean that we'll be back here in 6 months or a year's time protesting against abuses of Afghan detainees and bombings of Afghan villages as happened in Iraq over the last 5 years.
Free! Free al-Zaidi! Free! Free al-Zaidi! Free! Free al-Zaidi! Free! Free al-Zaidi! Jail! Jail! George Bush! Jail! Jail! George Bush! Jail! Jail! George Bush! Jail!
We're here today to defend our colleague Muntadar al-Zaidi. We fear for his life. We already know from the BBC that he's been badly beaten up in custody. He has a broken wrist and broken ribs. And we don't know that the Iraqi government has a dreadful record on the way that they harass, the way that they persecute and sometimes torture and kill journalists. So it's extremely important that we send our message today to the Ambassador Robert Tuttle and to George Bush that the occupying power has the responsibility for al-Zaidi's safety and must free him immediately. Now, I googled al-Zaidi this morning, as I have done every day this week, and the top link on Google is an article by an American journalist, David Lindorf, and it's called "Al-Zaidi has done what we journalists should have done a long time ago." He has stood up. He has stood up against the silence and the lies that we've been forced to take all too often in the British and international media. The professional role of journalists. I'm a journalist myself. Our role is to give a voice to people who don't have a voice. And for that reason, al-Zaidi might as well have thrown 27 million shoes at George Bush, because he was speaking for the vast, overwhelming majority of the Iraqi population. There is no press freedom in Iraq. Anyone who tells you any different is lying. Just 2 years ago, the Iraqi government introduced a new law, borrowed in large parts from the Saddam regime, which threatens journalists with 7 years in jail for criticising any government official. The New York Times, in its editorial, condemned this new law as being a travesty of democracy. At the same time, the Committee to Protect Journalists, the respected United States organisation, just yesterday produced its latest annual report on media freedom around the world, and yet again, for the 6th year running, Iraq is the most dangerous country in the world for journalists. If you're a journalist and you speak your mind in Iraq, then you put your life on the line. And this is what al-Zaidi has done. He's done it in front of the world's media. He's spoken up for the population of Iraq, and therefore he's thrown down a challenge to journalists around the world that there's no point in us carrying on silently reporting the lies and the distortions from the occupying powers in Iraq. It's time to stand up and say that the troops must leave and we must free Muntadar al-Zaidi.